Welcome to Noon Wednesday. I'm Marissa Wojcik, multimedia journalist for Here and Now on PBS Wisconsin. Today is November 10. This week, the state legislature is voting on map proposals that will change the boundaries of the state assembly and Senate, as well as Congress districts for the next 10 years. The redistricting process is confusing and sometimes even contradictory. However, a tool called the Partisan Voter Index can at least help us understand how a district is skewed. Jack Kelly from the Cap Times, who compiled the data for this index, joins me now. And Jack, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So just to start kind of from the 30,000 foot view, what information does something like a partisan voter index provide to the average voter? It sounds a little intimidating.
Sure. So the PVI is meant to show the partisan skew based on voting trends of a legislative district here in Wisconsin. So we have 132 legislative districts, 99 in the Assembly and 33 in the state Senate. Basically, what the PVI shows is how many percentage points on average does a legislative district vote more Republican or Democratic based on voting trends. And those voting trends for our database are the election results from the 2020 presidential election and then the 2016 presidential election.
And so tell us how the partisan voting index works in general.
Sure. So there's two maps, and basically they're interactive, and you're able to look at all of the legislative districts in the state, and each district gets a PVI score. Those PVI scores could be something like R plus 10 or D plus 4 or toss up. And what does that mean? So R plus 10 would mean that district votes 10 percentage points more Republican than the state as a whole. It would mean the same thing for Democrats, and then toss-up ratings mean that those districts are what they sound like. They're toss-ups. Basically, that means they are less than 1.5 percentage points skewed in either direction. So the toss-up metric is a little arbitrary, but we thought that 1.5 percentage points was fair, given that turnout is key in some of these assembly districts, and to shift 1.5 percentage points is not that much in a general election, like a presidential election, where you see high voter turnout. So basically, it's these kind of three metrics to show you either the partisan skew towards Republicans, towards Democrats, or on very few occasions in Wisconsin, a true toss-up.
And so you're taking the voting trends of how people in Wisconsin have voted for presidents over the last two elections, so 2016 to 2020, and the average of that is the baseline. And then if a particular district voted a certain percentage point above that baseline, then they're going to have R plus 10, for example. And so it really kind of shows you how strong certain political leanings are in certain districts. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it is important to note, like you said, the maps themselves represent voting trends. They don't necessarily represent the party of the lawmaker who holds that district. There are a few exceptions in the map where, let's say, a Democrat holds a district that actually gets a Republican rating, and a Republican holds a rating, or a district that actually gets a Democratic rating. So yeah, that's exactly right.
And so zooming in a little bit on these maps, are any districts what you characterize as equal, meaning they're very competitive, or even teetering towards equal? And so that means, a Democrat or a Republican candidate could have kind of an equal opportunity to campaign and potentially win that seat.
Yeah, so this is a great question as well. There are very few of them based on the database that we've built. There are 4 districts of the 99 in the Assembly that get a toss-up rating. 2 of them are in kind of the greater Milwaukee area in the suburbs, where we saw a harsh backlash to former President Trump in 2020. One of them is in northwestern Wisconsin along the Minnesota border, and the 4th is the greater La Crosse area, kind of right outside the city limits. So those are the 4 districts that get tried and true toss-up ratings. There are some other districts that find themselves in that plus 1.5, plus 1.6, plus 2 kind of rating that maybe would be a little bit more competitive. When you look at the state Senate, none of the districts get a toss-up rating by our metrics. But that being said, there are at least two districts where it gets a Democratic rating and a Republican holds the seat, and then there's another one where it gets a Republican rating and a Democrat actually holds the seat. So just because it's not getting a true toss-up in the PVI doesn't mean necessarily that one party can't win the seat, even if it goes against them. Now, it does get substantially harder, right? If you are a Democrat running in an R plus 1.9 district, that's a lot easier to win than if you're a Democrat and you're running in an R plus 12 district. And the same could be said vice versa, right? There are many districts that are skewed very heavily towards Democrats and would be almost impossible for a Republican to win in them.
So those districts where it was favoring, say, a Republican, yet a Democrat won that seat, they're really beating the odds of just kind of the general political persuasion of that area. And especially based on presidential elections and a greater trend towards straight ticket voting, meaning if someone votes for like a Democratic president, they're likely to vote Democrat all the way down. It's less common for people to vote both Democratic and Republican for different local versus federal races. So the trend of kind of leaning in harder to a political party is stronger these days. So what about the other side? Which districts are really heavily weighed towards Republicans or Democrats?
So this is also a really good question. I think that this is actually one of the more powerful things that the PVI can highlight. It highlights the kind of extreme partisan gerrymander that Wisconsinites have voted for for the last decade under these current maps. And I think you really see it kind of in two forms, right? So in and around the Madison area, there are, I think, 8 districts that vote on average more than 15 percentage points more Democratic than the state as a whole. Whereas when you flip it and conversely look at districts that favor Republicans, the vast majority of those districts find themselves in kind of that R plus 2 to R plus 10 or 12 area. So you see this kind of packing of Democratic voters in the Madison area and in the Milwaukee area, basically to just jam them into as few districts as possible. Now, there is some cracking, the kind of other accepted form of gerrymandering that people like to talk about. We see that in a place like southeastern Wisconsin. We see that with a district like Assembly Speaker Robin Voss's. Speaker Voss's district runs all the way up to the city of Racine, but does not encompass it at all. And it kind of dilutes the Democratic voters in the suburbs of the city of Racine by stretching for miles into western Racine County. So, Speaker Voss is a pretty safe seat. I think he gets a rating of R plus 9. So the PVI does a good job of really highlighting this packing of Democratic voters in some places, the cracking of Democratic voters in others, and then just kind of showing that, Republicans don't really have a huge skew in a lot of districts. They have a consistent skew that is just big enough that it makes it really hard for a Democratic candidate to overcome against them when they're running.
And so just a reminder, to be clear, this index for maps are for the current legislative districts as they exist today, not the redistricting maps that are being proposed right now. On Monday, the Senate passed along party lines the Republican-drawn maps proposal, and the Assembly is expected to do the same tomorrow. Both are very heavy Republican majorities. Can we infer about how much this partisan voter index with today's current maps could align with proposed maps and how those new district proposals could be skewed?
Yes. So it's not perfect because the maps are not identical. But with that being said, Speaker Voss and Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu have told us many times in public hearings and joint resolutions that the legislature have passed, the maps that we've, as Wisconsinites, have voted under for the last 10 years, those were very much the foundation for the maps that lawmakers used to draw the current proposal and that they're going to finish voting on tomorrow in the legislature. So some things do shift. There are some instances of incumbent pairing. There are some instances where the Madison area actually gets a new district that might not have an incumbent. So there are some shifts, but yeah, it can be useful in seeing that, if these districts are so skewed now and they are the foundation for the proposed new districts, it's a fairly safe assumption that those new districts would not be very competitive. Now, there have been many other analyses that have shown this. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project, for example, they've done some really interesting work about this. They have given the maps put forth by Republicans an F grade overall. I think they get a C in competitiveness. But basically, they've come to the conclusion that the proposed maps are some of the most extreme gerrymander possible and would heavily favor Republicans in legislative elections going forward if they were to be enacted.
So what about the maps that were drawn by the People's Maps Commission, which is a body created by Democratic Governor Tony Evers? Are they any more competitive? Are they any more kind of fulfilling what they say as being more fair maps?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. The People's Maps Commission's proposal, it's interesting. There have been some issues with it. It's been criticized for maybe not abiding by the Voting Rights Act because there are not enough majority districts. It's also interesting, something like the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, I was just looking at this before we came on, also gives the People's Maps Commission a C, like a letter grade of a C for competitiveness. But it's important to keep in mind that the maps would almost certainly result in Democrats winning more seats in the legislature. The competitiveness metric that they use, by my understanding of it, is how competitive would each individual race be. And so it gets the same grade as the Republican proposal because the districts, the way that the People's Maps Commission has drawn them, would bear more Democratic seats, but those Democratic seats wouldn't necessarily be competitive races. It's not as if every single district in Wisconsin would all of a sudden be a coin toss. So they would almost certainly be more competitive in the sense that Democrats would probably win more seats in the legislature than they have right now. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every race in every district would be more competitive than what we have right now.
Just really quick, why is competitiveness a good thing? Why is that a desirable quality for folks, say, at the Princeton Gerrymandering Project?
Sure, that's a great question as well. I think depending on who you ask, you will probably get a different answer. Basically right now, and we had talked about this briefly as well, Wisconsin is a swing state, though the legislature is very not reflective of that. Accordingly, you can see lawmakers lean more and more into their base rather than having to kind of walk this line and try to work bipartisanly so that they can win re-election in competitive things. So competitiveness in theory breeds more bipartisanship, because if you're a lawmaker that can, do whatever you want, say whatever you want, introduce whatever legislation that you want without facing fear of having to lose re-election, there's a lot less accountability there. So I think someone would tell you that competitiveness can be good because it holds people accountable more often. Lawmakers would have to, think a little bit more before they act in order to win more votes. So competitiveness from that measure is interesting. For the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, I think that, it's very heavily based in statistics, right? So I think ideally in their world, they would want to see districts as close to a 50-50 toss-up as they could. So I think competitiveness is interesting. I think it really does depend on who you ask, and you'll get a lot of different answers about it.
So in that sense, how exactly is Wisconsin a swing state if there are so many Republican seats that outnumber Democrats? Why is Wisconsin always seen as a swing state when it comes to presidential elections, statewide elections?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. Wisconsin's a swing state because, let's be honest, it swings. It has, 2016 was a shock to a lot of people when President Trump carried the state. Prior to that, a Republican hadn't won Wisconsin since the 80s. But we've always seen a very fierce battle between Republicans and Democrats for statewide office. Democrats have had success in recent statewide elections, though that could easily swing back, as we saw in the early 2010s when Republicans dominated things. So that's interesting. How is Wisconsin a swing state? I think that the gerrymander actually highlights how much of a swing state Wisconsin is. Democratic voters, it's no secret, are packed into urban centers, right? We see them in Dane County and in Madison. We see them in Milwaukee. We see them other places too. Wausau is a little pocket, Eau Claire is a little pocket, La Crosse, even, the city of Green Bay. So it's interesting. The state as a whole, the legislature inherently, experts will tell you, favor Republicans by 2 or 3 percentage points, just given the criteria involved in drawing the maps. The districts have to be contiguous. Wisconsin is a big rural space, and Democratic voters are fairly concentrated. So Wisconsin is a swing state because from a total statewide vote, we see a very close 50-50 split most often. The legislature, even if the districts were a toss-up in every district, you would probably still see a slight skew in favor of Republicans just based on that kind of rural geography of Wisconsin.
So the Cook Political Report says that, while a lot of people blame gerrymandering for the cause of how polarized politics has become, they say that they've found that voters are actually self-sorting politically, meaning that where they are kind of tends to align with how they vote. And so it's not gerrymandering that's the problem. It's just kind of naturally happening. Is that a fair characterization of what's happening in Wisconsin?
That's a great question. It's really interesting. I think that the Cook Political Report certainly makes a salient point there. Like-minded people like to live alongside other like-minded people. I think any number of sociologists would tell you that. I do think, though, that gerrymandering could contribute to this kind of hyper-partisan political landscape that we've seen, kind of, what we were discussing earlier, right? If I'm an incumbent that never faces a serious challenge from somebody of the opposite party, I can really lean into the base. In Wisconsin, it's that conservative base, and we've seen things that they've legislated on recently that leans into kind of the conservative base and the kind of growing element of what people like to call the culture wars in and around Wisconsin. So I think that gerrymandering can lead to hyperpartisanship because it almost creates an element of lack of accountability for lawmakers. And this goes for both sides, right? Democrats in Madison are not going to lose their seats. So Democrats in Madison can go to the legislature and do and say what they want, just like a Republican in an R+15 rural district in north central Wisconsin is not going to lose their seat, so they can do the same thing in the legislature. So you get that partisanship because there's almost this lack of accountability because you don't have to fear losing re-election. So I think the Cook Political Report does make a good point. Yes, like-minded people like to live alongside like-minded people and hang out with them and do those kinds of things. But I do think that maybe that is too much of an oversimplification.
Now, Governor Tony Evers is expected to veto the GOP proposal and has said that the current maps should just be thrown out. Does starting from scratch make drawing competitive maps even possible given Wisconsin's demographics and geographics? Have people, for example, from the Princeton Gerrymandering Project been able to give examples of how it could work?
Yeah, I think that we can just look back at Wisconsin history to see how it would work. Governor Evers will veto these bills. He said so several times. I've talked to him about this, and he is adamant that the moment they are passed and they come to his desk, the pen, he will use the veto pen and he will strike them down. And that sets up pretty much the standard approach to redistricting in Wisconsin, which is a lawsuit and a court settling it. Now, normally it's a federal court. That's how it was in the 80s and the 90s and the aughts. A federal court also tweaked the maps that were implemented for the past decade. The state Supreme Court has handled this before, way back in the 60s, and very well might do it again this time. But it's interesting, going back to your point of, can you draw them from scratch and create a competitive environment? I look at the 2000s. A federal court drew the districts that Wisconsin voters voted under during the 2000s. And we saw a number of majority changes in either one or both chambers of the legislature, right? I mean, we saw it right before Republicans became the majority, kind of on the back of the Tea Party movement and the backlash to the election of former President Obama and passing the Affordable Care Act. Those maps, Democrats were the majority. They were the majority in the Senate. They were the majority in the Assembly. And there was a Democratic governor. And in the next election, under those more competitive maps, Republicans swept them away and actually won a huge majority in the Assembly and the Senate. So I think it can be done that you could draw more competitive maps from scratch. I mean, courts have done it before. And I'm not an expert on map drawing, but I certainly think that Wisconsin history shows that it's possible to pick it up from scratch. While also possible taking into consideration things that are submitted to the court. That's why the governor has been so adamant about his People's Maps Commission in anticipation that this will end in a lawsuit. He wants to have something to present to the court that they could maybe work off of. The same thing with the Republican plans that we see going to be passed by the legislature this week.
And we learned, again, from Charles Franklin's Marquette Law School poll last week, that a majority of people do favor a nonpartisan body to draw the maps. Now, redistricting officials must follow certain criteria laid out in the law. However, there's a lot of leeway within those parameters, and it's up to a person's interpretation of those criteria. Often, as we said before, can sometimes be contradictory. Are there any criteria saying that districts should strive to be competitive and that is a desirable goal?
Right. So competitiveness in and of itself is not a criteria for drawing the maps. Speaker Voss pointed this out at the public hearing when he and the majority leader testified. You can consider partisanship when drawing the maps. They admitted they very much did consider partisanship when they were drawing the maps that are before the legislature right now. I think it's important to keep in mind competitiveness is not a criteria necessarily that can be used to determine what boundaries should look like. There are the obvious ones laid out in the state constitution of, districts need to be contiguous. You want to, as much as possible, keep communities of interest intact. And also there's this concept following a series, of federal court rulings going back to the 60s of one person, one vote. So what a court really looks like at districts when we get into a lawsuit, like we're going to see in the coming months, is are there an equal number of people in each district? And there can be small variations in that number, but if the variation is too great, the federal court will actually step in and tweak what the districts look like to kind of adjust some of that number. So competitiveness, not something that courts will consider. This kind of one person, one vote moment is much more, is what federal judges will find much more intriguing. Now, there are ways to do it. Democratic voters made a claim and the 3-judge panel actually ruled the current maps unconstitutional before that lawsuit was thrown out on a technicality by the US Supreme Court. And in that lawsuit, voters were arguing that, sure, there are an equal number of people in each district, but our votes are being wasted. It's that we're not actually being represented in the way that we want to be. So there are some interesting legal arguments to be made, and we'll see how it plays out and whether the state Supreme Court decides to take this on, whether they punt it and let a federal court settle it. The next few months is going to be, in a way, equally chaotic, but a lot more is going to happen behind the scenes in terms of how we actually get to these final legislative maps.
All right, we leave it there. Jack Kelly from the Cap Times. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more from Here and Now in PBS Wisconsin, you can visit pbswisconsin.org. And thank you so much for joining us on Noon Wednesday.